Hello everyone, I am Dr. Manika Gupta. I am an assistant professor at Department of Geology, University of Delhi. Today we would be discussing the module related to hydrological modeling with GIS. In this module, you will be able to understand how you can use the GIS or the Geographical Information System to model our hydrological conditions and how is this beneficial instead of using our traditional methods for modeling the hydrological conditions. The hydrological modeling with GIS enables us to model the hydrology at a global or a regional scale also, in comparison to the traditional methods which were limited to our site-based analysis. So, in this module, it is important to understand that we are showing you an application of GIS in hydrological modeling. Now, why is it important to ascertain the hydrological modeling or the hydrologic conditions of any region on a regional basis or on a global basis? Hydrological modeling is important because it helps in understanding or predicting and forecasting maybe precipitation, runoff, discharge data. Any of these data is important component of our hydrological cycle. So, hydrological modeling performs or forms an important part where GIS has its roots and it is being continuously used today. All the GIS softwares today have the methods for hydrological modeling. So, it's an important aspect where you can use GIS and the satellite data. So, how can this GIS be utilized for hydrological modeling? First of all, you need to understand what are the data which are required in hydrological modeling. So, if you are considering a hydrological water balance model, you will understand that you need at least the precipitation data in that region. You will need the land use land cover of the region. You might also need the soil data. I am not going into the specifics of the water balance because that's related to more of hydrology. I will be showing you here how you can use GIS to incorporate these already available data sets and what you can get out of this. Now, as in first example, how can we use the GIS software for hydrological modeling? We will take an example of watershed analysis. Now, it is very easy to delineate a watershed in a GIS software. It can be automatically done. However, before you start delineating a watershed automatically, you need to understand the concepts behind how is it delineating a watershed in a software. So, for delineating a watershed, you need first data which is your digital elevation model. As you know, digital elevation model is a 2D model representative of a 3D visualization of the elevation details on a raster cells of equal sizes. So, you get an elevation of the region of equal cell sizes which is utilized here. Now, why an elevation data is useful or important? Elevation data is able to give you the slope and aspect. How you derive the slope and aspect will be dealt in another module of this session. But here you will have to just think about that raster data of elevation model is giving you the slope and the aspect values. So, once you have the slope and the aspect values, it lets you know how the water will move, what is the surface water flow conditions, where is the elevation high, where is the elevation low, where the water will accumulate and where would be the final discharge in the whole region. Now, before DEM or the digital elevation model can be utilized for creating the flow accumulation models or for the stream networking, we usually fill the sinks in the DEM model. What are the sinks? Sinks are extremely low elevation points which have arisen due to error in our sampling points or due to interpolation while creating a DEM model, which needs to be removed. Now, how do we recognize these values? These values are recognized if all the neighboring cells have an approximately higher elevation data and only a single value in between or a single raster cell has a very low value in between. So, to not have an issue when you are creating an accumulation map, you have to remove these sinks. This sink removal technique is known as the fill technique and it's available in the software. Once this has been done, you can now delineate the direction of the flow. Now, how do you obtain a direction of the flow? First, you need to create a slope map. So, suppose you have a raster here and it's divided into 9 cells here, and it represents an upstream to downstream data here. So suppose this is 50, 40, 30, 20, 60 again, 15, 5, 45 and 35 here. So this is your raster data. Now we need to calculate here the flow direction. How do we calculate the flow direction for this raster? First of all, you need to remember that these are your 8 directions which are considered. Your 8 directions are north, south, east, west, northeast, southeast, southwest and northwest. So these are your 8 directions, and when you are considering the flow direction model, these are also maybe given the values as 1, 2, square of that 4, 16, 32, 64 and 128. So this is known as the 8-point-Poor model. That is what these values are given. After we convert this into the slope map, we have the slope directions, and once we have the slope directions, these are the values assigned to it. Now this was your elevation raster. How do you calculate the slope from this? This is your 50. This is the highest elevation. So how can the water move from the highest to the lowest? It can go to either this, it can go in this direction, or it can go in this direction. Now when we need to calculate the slope in this raster, so this is your upstream raster cell value. Where can it go? The slope can be calculated here, the water can go here and here, because we have low elevation values in the all the three cells. But our D8 algorithm allows only the movement of water into only one cell that has the steepest slope. So how do you calculate the slope in all these three directions? Simply 50 minus 40 upon, because it's in horizontal direction, just 1, that is 10. In this vertical direction, again it's 50 minus 20 upon 1, that is your 30. And for your diagonal direction, it will be 50 minus 30 upon root 2, because we are taking a diagonal distance here. That is the hypotenuse of this, which would be equal to 1 square plus 1 square, that is your root 2. So here it would be 20 by root 2. So the least slope is 10 value. So that means the water will move in the direction of this. So this kind of map is created for all the raster cells. So once you create this kind of map, you might get something like this. You calculate this, you calculate the slope at every raster cell here. So based on the slope and the aspect direction, we can have the aspect direction for all the cells. So here, since the water will move from this cell to this cell, so a flow direction is this. Similarly, we can have these values for all the other cell values, and for this the movement is here. Now this cell is already 20, that means it has the least slope. So the water is not coming from either of these cells. So we don't have anything here. The movement from 60 would be towards this direction, 15 will go in this, and 5 is your last point, which has the least the least slope or the accumulation point here. For this it's 30, it will be moving here, 45 would be going again here, and 35, since again it's a downstream value, all the values are at higher elevation, but this is 30, so it can move in this direction. So you can see we created an accumulation or the flow direction map here. Now what does this tell us? This tells us the movement of the water which is happening here, from each cell in which direction the water is moving. Once we have this kind of raster with us, we can have our flow accumulation model now, or the flow accumulation raster data. How do we get the flow accumulation raster data? We again make one more raster here, and we have again these 9 cells, and we count how many cells are giving water to which cell. So this cell it's not getting the water from any cell, so this is 0. This is getting water from this, so the value would be 1. For this, again nothing is entering here, this is 0. Now if you look at this cell, the water already was entering from this cell here, so we have 1 and 2 from here to here, so this would be 2 and this is third. So here the water is entering from 3 cells, so the number here would be 3. Similarly here, because the water is not entering from any of the cells, again this is 0. Here also there is no water entering, it's 0. Finally we have 3 cells from here, 3 is entering here, 4, from here 5, and so this would be 5 and this would be this also added to this, so this is 6. So finally you can understand 6 cells are sending water in from these 9 cells. So this is your accumulation point. With this we are able to get how much of the water is being calculated. We can also calculate the drainage area here. How do we calculate the drainage area? We calculate the number of cells which are in the flow accumulation model which are contributing to it, those into the cell size or the spatial resolution of your raster data. So your number of cells contributing here are these cells. So we calculate, add these cells number and multiply it with the spatial resolution. That might be, if it's a raster SRTM DEM, then it might be into 30 meters. So you'll get an area of the drainage basin. So this is based on your D8 model. Now in this D8 model, the one drawback was it's using only the steepest slope. In real life that doesn't happen. There can be slopes where the contributing cell can be 2. So there's another model which is used, that is a D infinity model. What happens in D infinity model? In D infinity model, it doesn't only consider the steepest slope here, but it utilizes another method where it partitions the same water amount within 2 neighboring cells. Now there also it cannot partition in more than 2, but at least in 2 cells. So it helps in the area where it is not a very steep slope, but you have a little bit of a flatter surface where the water is moving in all the directions. Now for the D infinity model, we again have the same raster as in the D8 module. Now here we again have the same raster cells and we need to calculate the slope. So before calculating the slope here, we take the center point here and we create the triangles in all the directions, or we create 8 triangles here, as you can notice. So if you will notice, this is one triangle here. So it's coming in 2 of the cells here. So in this way we get actually 8 triangles here. Once you have these 8 triangles, now suppose our slope vector was going here. So this is your slope vector. This is one slope vector. So initially this slope vector would have been steepest and it would have been considered only in this cell in the D8 model. But in D infinity model, what it is doing, it's taking this angle into consideration. Now this angle suppose is alpha 1 and this is alpha 2. So the ratio of the water which is going in 2 of these cells would be, for this first cell, it would be alpha 2 upon alpha 1 plus alpha 2, and for this value it would be alpha 1, the ratio of alpha 1 plus alpha 1 plus alpha 2. So this is the amount of water ratio which will be going in 2 of the cells now. So this is the D infinity model. For convenience and simplicity, we still use the D8 algorithm, but if you know the situation that it's not very steepy slope and you need to consider the neighboring cells, then you utilize this model. This model is also available in all of the QGIS software, ArcGIS software, and you can decide which method is more easy or which method you want to use. Now, on the basis of these accumulation maps, we can understand when the value of the raster cell comes out to be 0, that would actually imply the position of the ridges. And the values or the positions in the raster where there are more number of amount of water is accumulating, we can know whether it's a stream or just a pixel where the water is accumulating. So this accumulation model helps us in delineating the stream network also. In delineating the stream network, we have an option of providing a threshold value. Now what is a threshold value? Threshold value implies that a part of the raster cell would be considered in the stream network only and only if 200 minimum number of cells are contributing to it. So remember in the first figure which we had initially, where our accumulation value was coming to 6. So now when we have a large regional scale, we would want that value from 6 should actually be at least 200. So if it's at least 200, it's considered to be a part of stream network. In this way, you can develop the stream network based on your threshold values. In that also, you can provide the stream network density or the stream network order. Now, what is the stream network order? I am sure you must be knowing from your hydrology classes. How do you have the stream network order? Your stream order is developed if the only contributing tributary is 1, that's stream order 1, and if there are 2 contributing, so both are considered number 1 and the second one is considered number 2. I'll explain it with a figure here. So for calculating stream order, maybe these are 2 contributing streams, the water is then flowing from here, then it's contributing into the main stream channel. So the number for this would be 1 order, this would be also 1. Now 2 are contributing to this one, so this has number 2. Finally, this is your main stream. So because the 2 number was contributing to this finally, so the number for this would be 3. So this is known as your stream ordering or the Streller's stream order technique. So this can be easily calculated in GIS based on your flow accumulation map. Finally, this flow accumulation map along with the stream delineation, you can have the watershed of the area. What do we imply by watershed? Watershed is basically if you have this raster here and you know where the water is accumulating, from where the streams are coming. Suppose this was your last point here which had the value 6, or it would be higher for a bigger scale or the regional scale. Then what would you do? You would have, this would be considered as your pour point here, and you would have a watershed delineated in a way that the cells from which the water is flowing in this direction are included in that circular manner. So this line or the boundary tells you that this particular watershed, everything from within these cells is ultimately ending here. So this pour point can also be a location where in situ discharge measurements are taken. So initially also you can decide a pour point and tell the system to incorporate stream network from this point. So that could be another way to have pour delineation. Sometimes when you are calculating the discharge data at multiple points, you can already associate or pinpoint those pour points at the stream points there or the stream networking. So suppose you also have a discharge station here and a discharge station here somewhere and a here. So at all the 3 points you can signify your point locations or your pour point locations. So you can also have sub watersheds within a main watershed. So maybe if you are treating here as your discharge point, so starting here your watershed might be delineated, and from here it might include both, and this third finally would be a complete watershed. So you are getting sub watersheds between the watershed. So depending upon your requirement, it's a regional scale, you can have watersheds, you can have sub watersheds. This actually helps you in catchment management, water resource management on a drainage on a watershed scale. So this was one of the application where GIS is utilized. There is another application also where the GIS can be utilized in hydrological modeling, that is associated with calculation of the runoff. So another method where we use hydrological modeling with GIS is runoff prediction. Now why is runoff prediction important? Runoff prediction is important especially during rainy seasons or the monsoon period, when you want to know how much of the water is not remaining in the river and it's actually flooding the situation. So to calculate how much goes into the flooding, you need to know the runoff criteria. Suppose you have a river and it's beside a sandy soil, so your infiltration rate would be higher because it's a sandy soil. So the accumulation rate decreases there. However, if you have a clay soil, then the accumulation is higher even for the same amount of precipitation, because the infiltration rate in clay soil decreases. That is why, depending on the soil type, you will understand that the runoff will change. So if you want to predict runoff, you need again the elevation data, you need the land use land cover data, you need the soil data. Now, why do you need the digital elevation data? You need the digital elevation data because you can understand the slope. So as far as by now you know, if it's a steeper slope, water will flow through it. If it's a flat surface, water will try to infiltrate more. So these layers, as you know, can be integrated in GIS. So once you have integrated the digital elevation model, your soil maps, your rainfall criteria, and land use land cover, you can easily predict how much runoff is going to take place at a particular cell. So the equation which is used is actually based on a very simple curve number method. Now runoff can be predicted using this particular equation where Q is represented by runoff. Q is P minus IA whole square upon P minus IA plus S. Now P here represents the precipitation at the raster cell we are considering. IA is your initial abstraction for that particular cell. S is a condition which is represented by your curve number, where S is equal to 1000 divided by Cn minus 10. Cn is your curve number. This curve number is dependent on the soil type and the land use which is present there. These details of the curve number have already been provided by the USGS and they are available easily in a form of table at any of the literatures. So whatever is your soil type, whatever is your land use, based on those both data, you can have the Cn number at each of the raster pixel. So, and the precipitation is your daily precipitation value. So once you have all these values, you can easily predict runoff at each of the raster cells in your regional model. So this was one of the methods to predict the runoff. Another method where the hydrological modeling can be done using GIS is, these days physically based models are also integrated in GIS. What do I imply by physically based models? Physically based models imply we are using our physical equations to develop a relationship between the water present on the surface and the water in the unsaturated zone. So a specific model known as WETSPA is currently available, which utilizes the thematic layers and calculates the water in each of these zones within the GIS and gives you how much water is present in which cell, how much is available for runoff, and what is going for the recharge for the groundwater. So these physically based equations actually use the Richards equation, which again is out of the scope for this module because we are more concentrating on the GIS and not on the hydrology. But you can look at this model and understand that how it can be integrated with the GIS. Another field in hydrological modeling is the snowmelt runoff prediction. Now, in snowmelt runoff prediction, how is it different from the runoff prediction? It is different because in snowmelt runoff prediction, we also need to consider the snow criteria and not only the precipitation. So, in precipitation, it's the rainfall only. But if you want to consider the snow component of this precipitation, it's at the higher altitudes where the melting results in the runoff. So to calculate this, again we can use it in GIS where we need the thematic layers again of digital elevation model, our slope model, our aspect thematic layer, as well as our land surface temperature. Now here the land surface temperature lets you know how much snow is going to melt. This is based on the degree day method, and it's a very simple method where we use only these of the four thematic layers, and we can easily predict the discharge which is going to take place at a downstream point. So these were four methods where we have utilized GIS in hydrological modeling. So in hydrological modeling, utilizing GIS, there are various other applications also where we can utilize GIS, like drought prediction, landslide prediction, or the landside vulnerability map. Even for groundwater potential zone mapping, our GIS can be used. How can we use it for groundwater potential zone mapping? For groundwater potential zone mapping, we can provide the basis for understanding how much potential or the weightage we have to give to each of the thematic layers which we have. For groundwater potential zone mapping, suppose we need to understand where there are lineaments, where there is presence of more vegetation, where there is presence of more or the water table is higher. So if we have all these data layers, then we can easily utilize this GIS softwares for prediction of groundwater potential zones. So in the end, I would just like to summarize that GIS has numerous opportunities where it can be utilized in hydrological modeling. Even soil moisture can be simulated at each of the pixels once we provide an equation to it, because mathematical algebraic equations are easily possible in the raster environment or the GIS environment. So runoff prediction, simulations, hydrological soil moisture at meadow zones or the surface level, or the height of the discharge measurements or actual discharge measurements estimation are easily feasible using our hydrological modeling in GIS. Other than this, we can also integrate the GIS with physically based models like VEDSPA or even the land surface models, which utilize all these data there. Also, lot of references available to you on this, and I am sure you would be able to read this more on those references and you can understand more about hydrological modeling. Thank you.